right, hello, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. My name is Geneva Malone, and I'm with the Levy Senior Center Foundation. We're happy to welcome our remote audience to today's Levy Longevity Emotional Fitness for Seniors with Shaun Zetlin. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Shaun. He is a master fitness trainer, author, motivational speaker, and CEU provider for fitness professionals. He is the author of the Push-Up Progression book series and Emotional Fitness, which he is currently touring throughout the Northeast. He earned his bachelor degree from the University of Delaware and holds multiple certifications from the National Academy of Sports Medicine and the International Sports Sciences Association, including Corrective Exercise Specialist, Performance Enhancement Specialist, Senior Citizen Specialist, and Strength and Conditioning Specialist. For over 21 years, he has run a successful health and fitness business in the New York City metro area and is a four-time Best of Brooklyn Best Personal Trainer winner. Shaun will introduce his new gym bag approach, featuring master mantras and emotional guidance techniques, which are powerful tools for your fitness journey. He'll also demonstrate gentle, equipment-free exercises designed to help you harness emotional strength through movement, plus learn essential sitting, standing, walking, and fall prevention techniques. This Levy Longevity is made possible by the Levy Senior Center Foundation and the City of Evanston. As always, we appreciate your support of the foundation as we continue to work to connect our community of older adults. I'd like to now turn things over to Shaun Zetlin and Emotional Fitness for Seniors.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. I want to say thank you to the Levy Senior Center Foundation. Thank you to the City of Evanston for having me. It is an honor, and I'm excited to take you guys through a journey like no other. This will be a journey of self-discovery, self-healing, and self-care. And emotional fitness is all about the physical and the emotional. So I would like to share some slides right now and take you guys through my journey. And so we're going to get started. So when we talk about emotional fitness, what is emotional fitness? So emotional fitness is about empowering yourself through, again, movement. You want to make sure that when you start any fitness journey, whether it's emotional or physical, that you're comfortable first from where you are starting, meaning that you're meeting yourself in the moment. I think it's very important when you start any physical activity or any emotional activity to understand who you were, where you are, and where you want to go, right? Where do you want to go? So this all personally started for me many years ago. I would go to the gym, I would do my personal workouts, and I had some things that I had to emotionally work on. I had some repressed anger, I had some anxiety, and I would be at the gym and nobody knew where I was at the time. And it was great. It was in my own little world. And when I was doing my fitness activities, I would think to myself, okay, what are some things that I can give myself to make myself feel better? What kind of self-care, in other words, can I give myself? And this all sort of laid the groundwork to the book that I had written. And again, these presentations I'm giving. So the first, and this is very exciting, the first of 5 master mantras is embracing your inner work and accepting your path. This is so challenging, I think, for all of us. And I want to, make this really clear. I mean, this is very difficult work. What we're talking about here is not comparing yourself to somebody else's, not comparing your chapter 1 to somebody else's, let's say, chapter 8. Your journey is unique to yourself. With accepting your path comes a lot of accepting your own, let's say, emotional burdens of who you used to be. And by that, I mean like really cleaning up your childhood. And I think for a lot of us, we don't realize it, but subconsciously we make choices throughout the day. And those choices are all in the subconscious. In fact, you probably make 90 to 95% of the choices that you make, again, the subconscious, you're unaware. And when you think about the choices that you're making, it's really important to understand where they came from. That leads me to a really, really important topic, which is vulnerability. So I think for a lot of us, we think about vulnerability as shame, right? If I admit something about myself that maybe seems to be negative, or if I perceive it to be negative, that's not necessarily lovable. And that's where I think we're all a bit wrong. And I say that with kindness and respect, where it's very important, I think, to share vulnerability, because more often than not, when you share something that's vulnerable about yourself, somebody's able to meet you halfway. Not only that, then there becomes also this authenticity that happens as well, right? So you think about it like when you go out through your day and, whether you're with a family member or friends, or you're just out and about, with strangers, and a common thing to say to somebody is, how are you, right? And 9 times out of 10, we usually all probably say something like, we're fine, when we're really not, right? I'm not saying you should share everything with a stranger, of course, but what I'm saying is that, if you have a family member, if you have a friend that you feel that you can confide in, I think it's really important. It's really important to say, you know what? I'm kind of feeling a little blue today, or I'm kind of worried about X. And more times than not, somebody will be able to meet you halfway, and they'll be able to say, oh, you know what? I've experienced that too. It's so important, I think, to share a vulnerability with somebody. Very, very important. Master mantra number 2 is to believe that you are worthy. And this is really interesting, because I get really excited about this master mantra, because I think a lot of us at times, and something don't mean to accuse, but a lot of us at times don't believe we're worthy. And worthiness, believe it or not, is taught. So not to demonize anybody's parents here, or a caregiver, or a counselor, or a teacher, but if somebody said, again, negative things about you, and as your brain is forming as a child, in fact, your brain doesn't form to 26, 27 with logic, emotionally speaking, you're going to believe that person. So again, if somebody says, you're bad, you're going to believe that you're bad. If somebody says that you're, again, these negative concepts, you're going to believe that. This is where I think a lot of us get stuck as adults, right? Because a lot of us say to ourselves, well, again, I may, give everything to my kids. I'm going to live for my kids, but I wouldn't treat myself the same, right? I'm a big believer in certainly giving to my girls and giving to my kids, but you also have to give back to yourself. You have to believe that you are worthy. And again, this goes back to, again, rewriting the script of maybe what you were taught, right? So I don't think, again, knowing you're worthy is a selfish concept. I think for some of us, we feel like, oh my God, especially if like a working parent, there's no time for yourself to work out. That is not selfish. It's just not. Again, you have to fill your own cup before you can fill somebody else's. So believing that you are worthy really, again, goes back to understanding the lessons that you were taught as a child, and then rewriting that script. So one of the activities I've done with my clients and myself, it's really important to think about, like, let's say you had a teacher and they were really harsh, or they were really strict, and maybe they said some negative things about you, right? This particular teacher, we'll just call her Mrs. Smith. And let's say Mrs. Smith said, oh, you know what, you're not college material, or you know what, you're not a good student, right? That's what Mrs. Smith thought about you. That doesn't mean that that's true. But I think for a lot of us, we believe that that must be true, and it's not. So what I like to do is I like to take a sheet of paper, and I like to draw a straight line vertically down that sheet of paper. And on one half of that paper, you're going to write everything that maybe, again, it could be a parent, could be a caregiver, it could be a teacher, a counselor, all the negative things that maybe that person said about you. And then on the other sheet of the paper, I want it to align with yourself. Were you taught that, or was that really true? So again, believing that you are worthy. One of the things that I say I have a daughter who's 7, a daughter who's 5. And I literally say this to them every night. I say these 3 things to them every night. And they'll say, I know, Daddy, I know. But I really want to, again, explain to them that it's very important that I share these things with them, so they're not taught something else, either, again, from a teacher or a caregiver or somebody else, or a babysitter. And the 3 things I'll say to my 2 daughters are, and again, depending on which one I put down at night, I'll say, tell me you're awesome. And they'll say, I'm awesome. And I say, great. I'll say, tell me that you're worthy. And they'll say, I'm worthy. I'm like, great. And then I'll say, tell me that you can do anything. And they'll say, I can do anything. Again, it's really important that I say those 3 things to my daughters, so they grow up believing it. They grow up really understanding that all that is true, and they don't learn that from somebody else. Master mantra number 3, and again, there's going to be a quiz, guys. Master mantra number 3 is know that you are empowered. And I think, again, if we're struggling with something emotionally, we want to give it to, that individual. So let's say, again, we're struggling with a spouse, or we're struggling with maybe an ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, an ex-partner, and that person hurt you really badly in your past, right? And what do we want, right? We want that person to heal us, right? We want that person to say, that they're sorry. We want that person to be there for us. And even though all that is true, and you certainly deserve it if you're in that situation, it is actually a disservice. And the reason why I say that is because it's an opportunity for you to really heal yourself, right? I think a lot of times we just give our power away to somebody, again, hoping that they'll heal us. And the truth is, 9 times out of 10, they can't even help themselves, right? I mean, again, we all sort of are now hearing these terms, generational trauma, right? So let's say, you had a father that was cruel to you or he was strict with you. 9 times out of 10, maybe his father was that way too. And your father, again, did the best he could do, right? Again, most of the time it's not intentional, but if they might have done the work, if they might have, again, gotten help that they needed, maybe that would have ended with them and not, again, put on yourself. So the reason why I bring up that father analogy to say is, again, it could be a parent, it could be anybody that has hurt you. And I totally understand, wanting and almost desperately not giving up hope that that person can help heal you. But the truth is they can't. They just cannot. Again, it's an opportunity for you to heal yourself. And we'll go over that as this presentation continues. I'll go over again this new gym bag of how you're able to do that, all right? Master mantra number 4 is a very, very tricky one, and that is lowering the volume. So what does that mean, lowering the volume? Well, this is all about trauma. And normally, when I give these presentations and I start talking about trauma, and even when I've worked with, clients in the past or current clients, some people will say to me, I had a great childhood, Shaun, I didn't have any trauma. But I think a lot of times our definition of traumas can be very skewed, right? So trauma doesn't have to be the worst possible scenario imagined. Trauma can be what you didn't get as a child. Trauma can be, again, emotional neglect, your emotional needs not being met. That can be trauma. And then what happens is, again, if you've experienced something in your childhood or even adulthood that's been trauma related, it's really difficult to lower the volume, right? By lowering the volume, I mean, when I was a kid, my aunt, she gave me this big boom box, right? If you guys can picture it in the 80s, I think we all can picture that. And I remember when I plugged it in, the volume was at the highest level, the highest decibel, and it really hurt my ear. And I remember taking the dial tone and just turning to the left. And again, the volume, quote unquote, went down. That is what trauma is, right? Trauma, unfortunately, it's always with us. And we may not be able to fully ever get rid of it. But if we go back to master mantra number 1 and we accept our path, instead of saying, oh, well, why did this happen to me? I didn't deserve it. And all that may be true, but it's this weird blessing from the universe that the fact that you are experiencing it, it's now an opportunity to not only heal the trauma and maybe even heal generational trauma, but to lead you to your authentic self. So we'll go over again some tips about lowering the volume, but I want everyone to know that if you have been through any type of trauma, you certainly don't have to be a victim, and it absolutely doesn't have to define you. I mean, I say that all the time to certain clients that I work with emotional fitness. It does not define you. And the trauma that I personally went through, it doesn't define me either. It doesn't define any of us. So it's very important to remember that. Master mantra number 4, and I think this is a biggie for a lot of people, is being your biggest fan. So I like to joke a lot. And by joke, I'm just in jest when I say this, where I'll say, if people could get inside your head and they could hear the thoughts that go in your head, would you have any friends? Meaning, like, again, we're always hard on ourselves. We're always hard on ourselves. We are our own worst enemies. And this is why it's very important. It kind of goes back to master mantra number 2, which goes back to really giving yourself the unconditional love that you didn't receive. Again, all these mantras are all connected, but to be your biggest fan means also to do things with unconditional love. So for instance, this morning, I'll be very honest and transparent. A little tired, but I still wanted to get my workout in because the workout always goes on, as my father used to always preach and still says. And I was very, very excited to get my workout done because I love the way it feels. It's slow dopamine, it's beautiful serotonin, and the endorphins, are always, elevated. But I was tired. And in it, I remember saying to myself, you know what? This is an opportunity for me to always practice what I preach and to do things with unconditional love. So on every repetition, I would say to myself, okay, why am I doing this? Well, I'm doing this because I love myself. I'm doing this because I want to be healthy. Again, exercise, it really defeats every metabolic disease out there. It makes us feel good emotionally, as I've said, already in this presentation. So there's all kinds of reasons, a multitude of reasons, of course, to exercise, but to do things with purpose and to do things with not only purpose, with the really the ability to say, you know what, I'm doing this because I love myself. I'm doing this because, again, I want to be that parent, that teacher, that caregiver, maybe to the little version of me that wasn't there. I can, again, have that opportunity to do that as an adult. So these are the master mantras. We'll come back to these when I tie in all the physical work, but they're all very vital. And I'll leave this slide up for a moment because I kindly challenge everybody, and feel free to even close your eyes and think about what master mantra really speaks to you. Is there a master mantra where are you having trouble accepting your path from your childhood to adulthood to maybe even being an age that you are now? Do you have trouble with believing that you are worthy? What about knowing that you are empowered? Are you still maybe struggling about wanting that one person to heal you when you have that ability to do it yourself emotionally? Have you been through trauma? Have you addressed the trauma? Can you lower the volume? And then master mantra number 5, of course, is being your biggest fan. Are you your biggest fan? Not an arrogant thing to do, believe me. So again, emotional fitness, as I mentioned earlier when we first got on this call, right? It's self-healing, it's self-worth, it's self-discovery. And the idea here is that you may still have anxiety, and you may still have depression, and you may still have trauma, and you may have stress, good or bad stress. And my program doesn't necessarily eliminate all of that because that just wouldn't be true. No program can do that, none. But what it can do is it can give you emotional relief. It can give you emotional freedom. It can give you the tools to really combat some of these, again, negative emotions that you may be experiencing. All right. So we're going to go into the next slide. And the next slide, again, is very exciting because this is the emotional guidance techniques. With the emotional guidance techniques, and again, I'm going to tie everything physically, but the first one is visualization. And this is a two-parter for me, right? So I'm going to go back to vulnerability for a moment. And I will share a story about myself, which I think is very important. And then later on, I'll tie it into the physical. So growing up, I was not an athlete. And I'm actually, besides my dad being this professional bodybuilder and looking like Hercules, I was not that. I was overweight. I had club feet. Shout out to Tom Brady, who also had club feet. I had horrible gross motor skills. I would want to catch a ball. I would try, very much so. It would hit my chest and would fall on the floor. Again, really sad, very sad stories. But the amazing thing that's happened with visualization for myself is it's a chance to heal the past for me. So the story that I'd like to share after sharing all that about me is it's camp and I'm 11 years old. And if you can picture it, it's kickball. And there's lots of kids. There's kids to my left in one dugout. There's kids to my right in the other dugout. And there's plenty of kids in the field. And my brother is there who's 15 months younger than me. And it's my turn to kick the ball. And the counselor rolls the ball, and somewhat slow to his credit. And when he rolls the ball to me, it's a Charlie Brown moment. I literally miss the ball and I fall on my back. And everybody starts laughing, everybody, including the counselor. And the counselor even refers to me as a loser in front of everybody. So now everyone is laughing except for my beautiful brother, but everyone is laughing. And in that moment, I'll never forget it because it was an opportunity for me then to rewrite the script, right? It was an opportunity for me then to not shy away from physical activity, which would have been very plausible, right? I think it would have been very fair for most people to say, well, Shaun, man, that's a really rough moment. I can understand if you never want to, be in the world of fitness or put yourself out there. But it was my calling. In that moment, everything changed. And I knew on a deeper level, this is where my path will take me. And the reason why I can say that is because I experienced the struggle, right? I experienced the struggle. I experienced bullying that day. I experienced shame that day, public humiliation. Even the adults were referring to me as a loser. And in those moments, I think for all of us, we all have the ability to say to ourselves, okay, you know what? This pain can become your superpower. And that's what it was for me. So when I bring all this back to visualization, in visualization, I had the opportunity before I, let's say, go into a squat or a push-up or a plank or whatever the exercise is to say, you know what, I'm rewriting the past now. I have the opportunity now at this very moment to picture myself a little differently, right? Two things can happen here. The first is I have the ability to say, okay, you know what? After all this gets laughed at me and the counselor called me a loser and all these things, I didn't have a voice then and I was very quiet and definitely shy. But during visualization, I can say, you know what, to the counselor, I'm not a loser. And to all the kids, you shouldn't laugh at me, even though I had let's say maybe a not wonderful moment, you know. So that's something that I like to do. The other thing I like to do with visualization is, and I do this pretty much all the time, including in today's workout, I picture how I want the exercise to go, right? It's just like what I'm doing right now to all you fine, lovely people, right? If I go on to this call and I say to myself, oh man, I'm going to be terrible. They're not going to like me. Am I even going to be articulate? Then all that is true. Because again, that's the energy I'm putting out. But if I go into this call and I'm confident and I'm articulate and charming, all that will also be true. Because again, what you believe certainly manifests in the universe. So I'm choosing again to believe positive things. And that's what I would encourage everybody to do. And whether you're new to fitness or you've been doing it forever, before you go into any workout or any physical activity, now I do not think this is corny to say, but you are literally going to say to yourself, I can do it. I can do it. I'm worthy to do this, going back to master mantra number 2, but visualize yourself doing it with ease. Visualize yourself doing it with big success. The second one is body empowerment. For this emotional guidance technique, I always say to clients, and including myself, working out is never a chore. And I know for maybe some of the older people here, I'm sure they would certainly agree with that, to say that it is a privilege, of course, to age. At the same time, it is a privilege to have a body that is able to do what you want to do physically, right? It is not a chore to move your body. It is a privilege to move your body. It is a privilege to walk downstairs, upstairs. It is a privilege to stand. It is a privilege to do these things unassisted. And so I like to preach to my clients, especially my younger clients in their 20s, not to abuse their bodies with maybe drugs and alcohol on the weekends, right? But at the same time, to say what you do in your 20s sets you up for every decade. And to understand that, again, we all have emotions and we all, again, have busy lives. And sometimes the last thing we all want to do is work out, and we think about maybe exercise in a negative way. But we all, society should not. If you are able-bodied, that is a privilege. So I encourage people to be in their bodies and to embrace their bodies. It's your home. The third emotional guidance technique is owning your emotions. And so there's a lot of uncomfortable emotions out there, right? And I can say anger, I can say anxiety, I can say maybe lack of emotion if we're depressing our emotions down, like depression, sadness. And I think sometimes for a lot of us, we don't want to admit these things. Um, there are no wrong emotions, in my opinion. And I encourage everybody, if there's an emotion and maybe you're thinking about it right now that is uncomfortable to you, to absolutely embrace it. So for me personally, and again, I'm going to be vulnerable because that's what I'm encouraging everybody to do. And it's not a weakness, it's a superpower. In fact, vulnerability leads to invincibility. So I want people to feel invincible. But anger is a tricky one for me. I don't feel comfortable with anger. I don't like anger. I don't like feeling angry. I don't like that emotion. But I know that it's very important to get out. And for me, exercise is a really great tool. So is journaling. And journaling for me is something that I also encourage everybody to do. And you don't have to, again, be like Alexander Hamilton and right away. You can use an iPad, you can use your phone, you can use a good old-fashioned pen and paper, and you don't need to think about proper punctuation. You just want to get that stream of subconscious down. And I know for me, I was like, okay, well, why am I uncomfortable with anger? And I'm able to journal and figure that out. I will say that anger and anxiety are the other side of the coin, right? So if somebody is very anxious, right, and not all the time, but a lot of the times they're very connected. So if somebody is very anxious and they're anticipating all this fear, that also can, again, lend itself to anger. And anxiety it's painful because anxiety is a thief, right? Anxiety will say to you, oh, Shaun, it's the imposter syndrome stuff or whatever it is that maybe like our brain wants to tell ourselves. But anxiety will tell you false things about yourself. It may even tell you false things about somebody else or false things about the universe or again, your neighborhood or whatever it is. I have found that the number one way to destroy anxiety or to really knock it back, well, it's really two things. The first thing is, and I think this is very powerful, is you embrace it. You don't run from it. So if anxiety feels like to you at times, and we all get a bit overwhelmed, and that's fine. But if anxiety feels like, let's say, a big tidal wave, like a tsunami, embrace it. Embrace it with open arms. Give it a hug. Make it your best friend. Take away the sting, right? The second thing about anxiety is that, again, it robs you. It robs you of really who you truly are, and it distracts you. What I do if I'm feeling anxious is, and it's going to be no surprise to anybody here, is I work out, I move my body because movement is a killer for anxiety. Being in motion, it literally knocks anxiety to its knees, right? And sometimes anxiety can be a good thing, right? Because, it's a strange thing to say, but sometimes anxiety really is an opportunity for growth because that can lead to triggers, right? So what do I mean by emotional triggers? Well, emotional triggers usually stem from your childhood, but they can stem from really anything, right? As an adult. And triggers can be, you're watching something on TV, you listen to maybe a song, you meet somebody, they remind you of somebody, and that's a wound that needs to heal still, right? That's a wound. So I think any parent here on this call, right, can say, oh yeah, maybe my kids have triggered me, right? And maybe your kids trigger you because you haven't done that work in your own childhood, or maybe there's something again in your adulthood, right? But it's really important, I think, to understand that when you go through an emotional trigger, as painful as it is a teaching moment. It is an opportunity for real growth, real growth. And, with emotional fitness and with my particular program that I absolutely do on my own for myself, do I get triggered? I mean, I got asked this question on my current book tour. And this fine gentleman stood up and said, do you still get triggered? And I said, sure, sure. But I look at it very differently now. If I get triggered emotionally, I look at it as an opportunity for growth. What can I learn here? Because whether it's anxiety or the act of depression where we're depressing our feelings, or maybe OCD stress or rumination, those are all distractions. So I really want to say that again, those emotions of anxiety, again, and rumination and OCD behavior, they are all distractions because they do not get you to the root. And when I'm with my clients, I love getting to the root. I love peeling those layers of the onion because that's where, again, all the magic is, right? That's where, again, the healing begins, right? So I encourage everybody, and again, feel free to close your eyes, feel free to jot down some notes here, but if you could think of something that maybe you need to work on, whether it's in your childhood or adulthood, and you feel triggered and you haven't addressed it yet, I really encourage you to do so. The next emotional guidance technique is your inner will. This is really important, right? So I'll be very honest and transparent. I say this with full humility. I really like presenting. I don't get nervous. I get very excited because, again, this is my life's work, right? I really enjoy sharing these messages. But let's say I was anxious, or let's say I was stressed, and I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do this presentation, right? Well, I could think about it as this was not my first one. I've done others, right? The reason why I bring up this analogy is if you have accomplished something in your past that let's say you didn't believe that you could do, right? But you did. I encourage you to write it down, put it on a little note, put it on the bathroom mirror, put it on the fridge. That's not arrogant. That's not wrong. Those are reminders. I feel like for a lot of us, we get amnesia, right? We forget who we are. I'd like to ask the question to everybody here, and I've been doing this constantly on this tour, and it's a simple question. It may feel even trite to ask, but the question is, who are you? Really, who are you? And what I mean by that, I don't mean the car you drive, the zip code you live in, how much money's in your bank account, because those are really not true definitions of self-worth, believe it or not. They don't really even mean anything, actually. The question again is, who are you? What characteristics, if you could name 3 characteristics about yourself right now, what would they be? Right? What would they be? And then while I'm at it, and feel free again to close your eyes, can you name 3 physical characteristics that you love about yourself? Now, I have been asking this question on this tour, and I'll have different strangers and certain people that I know come over to me at the end, and I'm signing books and I'm standing there. And more times than not, believe it or not, you guys, people will literally say to me, oh man, that was really hard, Shaun. That was really hard for me. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. What was hard? I'm so sorry. And they'll say, no, 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 don't apologize. What was hard is I couldn't think of 3 things that I would really, again, like about myself emotionally, or 3 traits or characteristics, or even 3 things I like about myself physically. Right. So we think about weight loss, right? And certain clients will say to me, if I could just lose 20 pounds, or client recently said to me, if I can just get that, those 6-pack abs, my life will be great. Okay. I don't want to say that it's not for these people. But what I do encourage all my clients is to say to themselves, you're on this journey. The self-love doesn't happen when you get to that, that destination. No, the self-love happens while you're on the journey, right? You have to love yourself now. You have to love yourself, that unconditional love in those worst moments that you, again, this is again based on the individual, how they're feeling about themselves, but you have to love yourself constantly, unconditionally, even in your worst moments, or even if you haven't reached those fitness goals, because that self-love, that kindness to yourself will eventually help you get to the promised land where you want to look aesthetically. Okay. So again, your inner will. Think of a time where you didn't think you could overcome something and you did, and you did. So I really encourage everybody again to go back to that. The last one for the emotional guidance technique, and then we're going to get through the physical. And I said there was a quiz, you guys. So I'm going to, again, keep the screen up. But it's the mind-body connection. And I think this one might be self-explanatory, but the mind-body connection, if you work with yourself, again, it is you versus you, right? If you pull back that curtain, who's that face in front of you where maybe you haven't reached any particular goal, whether it's physical, emotional, something in your personal life, right? It's always going to be you versus you. And when you can work with yourself, when again, you can be, again, your biggest fan, when you can lower the trauma, when you can feel your empowerment, when you can feel the worthiness. And again, of course, when you can accept your path, right? With all those master mantras, anything is possible, right? The mind-body connection. You, again, cannot separate them, right? I think one of the things before we get into the physical, I would say is a common ground here is, if you feel stress from work, right? A lot of people, again, whether you're retired or whether you're still working and you have a desk job or you're remote or a hybrid situation, a lot of times people will feel what? Like stress here in their upper trapezius area and their scalenes, maybe in the rotator cuff area, maybe in the scapula, but they'll feel a lot of stress up here, right? And that's because, again, we can't separate the emotions and the physical, right? How we feel, how we think affects the body. All right. So you guys have done such a great job, again, listening to me with the master mantras and the emotional guidance techniques. I want to start putting things together. So we're going to go to the next slide, which is the physical. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the physical stuff. I'm going to give you guys a chance to really look at the screen, and then I'll come in and out. And again, we'll take the screen away and I'll be a bit bigger so you guys can see proper form. But I have two parts here to these physical exercises. The first is stabilization, right? So what is stabilization? So stabilization is the first building block of strength. Without stable muscles, we really shouldn't create movement. So what do I mean by that? I'd like to make it something tangible. Well, I say this humbly, I've written 2 push-up books. I'm a body weight kind of guy. I love doing planks. I love doing push-ups and all those exercises that you do in your body, even if, of course, when you're also isometric and you're still, will really set you up when you do work with free weights or a bar or any apparatus, right? So again, we really want to, I don't want to say master our own body weight, but we really want to be in our body. We really want to be with our own body weight before, again, we can pick up a weight, okay? So let's take a look at all these, and I'm going to do some demonstrations, and I want to put the emotional piece with all these. So we have standing, we have sitting, we have walking, we have an upright plank, which I'm super excited to show you guys. We have sitting marching and lying marching. Sitting marching is a little bit easier. Lying marching is a bit more advanced. We have box squats. We have bridges. Again, bridges will be a bit more advanced. We have our wall push-ups, which again, if you have a wall, that would be terrific to do. And then we have walking in place, and we have some balance work. So we're going to go through the first 3 together. I'm going to get a sip of water. And the first 3 are going to be standing, sitting, and walking. Okay. So I'm going to move back here so you guys can see me a little bit bigger. And the first one is standing. Okay. So when I go into standing, I think for a lot of us, this is the first building block. And when we're thinking about standing, we want to think about being in the true kinetic alignment. So what does the true kinetic alignment mean? Well, the true kinetic alignment of standing is that my feet, my knees, my hips, my shoulders, and my head are all going to be aligned. So I think we're all guilty of this. I don't mean to demonize anybody here, but I know I used to always do this, especially when I lived in Brooklyn and I was always walking around. But maybe we're waiting in line for something, and you might do this yourself, or you might see somebody. We may do something like this, right? We like shift our weight to one side, or we might, let's say turn our foot out. we're not in the kinetic alignment. So why is that so bad? Well, I'm not saying that we all have to stand like Frankenstein, but the more we can stand in the kinetic alignment, we really are engaging the correct muscle groups. If we stand, let's say, in a chronic way like so, and I shift my weight to one side, and I turn out my other foot, we're asking ourselves to create, again, an improper, efficient movement where we are going to absolutely have some muscular imbalances. And by muscular imbalances, I mean some muscles are going to be weak, some muscles are going to be tight. And the muscles that are very tight, by the way, are going to continuously get tighter and tighter. And then the horrible part about that is we lose strength, right? So if you're somebody and you're watching this call and you're like, oh, I'm a left dominant person, but sometimes when I reach for something with my left or I do something with my left, it's more work. It's just bells and whistles that we need to lengthen the left side. So let's go over the proper way to stand. I'm excited to show you guys this. So the proper way to stand is, let's start with the feet, because that's the first thing to touch the floor. Now I'm wearing my house shoes, proud to say. So the first thing is we're going to have our feet forward, right? So the feet are forward. I am not going to externally rotate my feet out. No external rotation. My feet are nice and forward facing you all. The next thing is, even though I have sneakers on, right, I'm going to use my keen eye to say, okay, are my second and third toe, so second and third toe, shin and knee aligned? Yes, they are. Again, we don't want to have the knees rotate out. We don't want to have the knees rotate in, right? We want to make sure, again, that the feet are forward, second and third toe, and shin and knee are all aligned. The next one is the hips. Now, this is a tricky one because if you're very, very tight in the hips, if you sit all day, or you're somebody that doesn't really create a lot of movement, safe to say the hip flexors, you have something called the psoas muscle, which is right here. Hip flexor and the psoas created a baby called the iliopsoas. You have a muscle called the iliacus. All these muscles are all pelvic muscles, and they can get really tight in a hurry. So how do we know if we have tight hip flexors? Well, movement can indicate that. But we want to make sure that, again, that the hips are aligned. I call it hip hiking, where we don't want to, again, hike one hip up. We want to make sure, that, again, that our hips are down and that they are aligned. If you're unsure, you just look down and say, okay, are our hips aligned? They are. I have a tendency, being a left dominant person, to have my left hip rotate to my right. And when it does that, my lats get tight as well. That's, again, for another story. But we just want to make sure we keep our hips aligned. So let me take you guys through all the points again. Right? Feet are forward, second and third toe and shin and knee are aligned. My hips are certainly going to be aligned, therefore. I'm going to roll my shoulders back, and I'm going to try to squeeze my shoulder blades in and down. Those are scapular muscles, and my arms are at my sides. And this would be terrific. This would be terrific just to stand here. And again, just make sure that I am also trying to also engage my glutes as well. And I'm just waiting in line. The next one is walking, and then we're going to get into sitting. So for some people, when I lived in Brooklyn, again, I don't mean to say this crude or in a crass way, but I would see people, walk like so, right? They walk, again, with their feet externally rotated out. And again, we would have the asymmetrical shifting where, again, some people would lean to one side. And we want to make sure that, again, if we're standing with proper, again, stabilization, we want to make sure that we're walking that way, right? So if I'm walking, I'm all about heel drive. So what does heel drive mean? Heel drive means that when I, again, strike with my right foot to start, my heel is on the floor. And then from there, I'm going to have the balls of the feet meet the heels, right? The reason why I'm all about heels first, and I'm showing this obviously very slowly to you guys, but the reason why is because our heels have a lot of energy and power in them, right? When you strike with the ball of the feet, the tendons aren't the same. Muscles aren't the same, right? A lot of the time, not all the time, but for most of us, the posterior chain, right? All those muscles behind us that we can't see are underused. They're underutilized. So it's an opportunity, right? If we are hopefully going to go for a walk with a loved one, or we're in a walking group, and even if you want to make it, a bit more intense, heel the ball, heel the ball, heel the ball, heel the ball, heel to ball, right? That should be, again, your new hit song, heel to ball, all right? Let's go over the sitting. So for the sitting, I'm going to bring in my chair so you guys can see it. My work chair that I use from home, and I'm remote. And I think for a lot of us, I'll show you from the side for a moment. We have the tendency, what our moms just always say to us, don't slouch, right? We all have the tendencies maybe to do this at times if we get tired, or maybe we're a bit more upright, but we're still slouching. This is called upper extremity disorder, where the shoulders come forward. And then when we do this, I don't want to get too technical here, but when we do this, all of these muscles here become very short. They become very tight. And then the muscles behind us, they get weaker, right? So again, the computer posture, the correct term here is called the kyphotic spine, but we want to make sure that we're sitting with proper posture. So what does that mean? Well, it's going to go back again to the feet, right? We want to make sure here that, and I used to see these guys on the subway, by the way, and those guys are really not nice people, because sometimes if you've ever been to New York City, and you'll see these guys and they sit very wide with their knees out, and those guys are not nice, they take up a lot of space. But I like to make the joke at home to say, take up the space at home. If you sit like so, or you sit with your ankles crossed like so, you're tightening up your hips in certain ways. And it's also a disservice because we're not engaging the heels for stability. As I said earlier, there's a lot of energy there. There's a lot of strength there, and it's usually untapped, right? So the first thing we want to do here is we want to sit wide, either past shoulder width apart, or we can bring it in, or like, let's say a little bit less than shoulder width apart, okay? That's the first thing. Knees, of course, are forward, hips are aligned, they look good. Here I am, and I'm typing away. Now, if I show you guys from the side, let's pretend I'm on my keyboard and I'm typing or I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing. I am making sure that my shoulders are pulled back. I'm making sure that I am really engaging my scapula. Those, again, the scapula for me is very important. You actually have 650 muscles in your body. That is the one muscle that does not have a home. It actually free floats on your spine, if you can believe that. And the scapula is vital when it comes to pressing and pulling. So we want to make sure that we squeeze our shoulder blades. Again, that's the scapula, right? And that'll also help lift the rib cage a little bit. I'm not saying again that we have to create, again, this proper positioning all the time, but if we're doing it more often than not, it's really going to help, and it can actually provide a stretch for the body, okay? All right, so let me come back to you guys, and I'll bring back my serrated chair again. All right, so as I share my screen again with you all, we're talking again about the upright plank and sitting, marching, and lying down marching, okay? So I'm gonna take you through the upright plank, and then I wanna show you guys sitting marching and lying marching, all right? So those will be the next two that we go over. So the upright plank is very similar to, again, standing, except we're gonna hold it. Now, what we learned about isometric movements, and this is just really cutting edge information, really end of 2024 to 2025, is that, believe it or not, just being still, which makes sense, but being still can actually lower blood pressure. Believe it or not, how great is that? So here's what we're gonna do. And let's say that doing a forearm plank on the floor, which I'll get to, but let's say that just feels like it's too much and we're just somebody who's starting out in the world of fitness, right? We're just beginners. This is one that I give everybody, but I also think for somebody like me who's been working out since I was 13, I'm now 47, so 30 plus years, it's also good for me to do. Why is this a good exercise? Because again, we're gonna work the core and we're gonna work the glutes, and it's not as intense as it could be as if I was, let's say, supine or pronated on the floor, but it's still very effective. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna have our feet, knees, and legs together, right? I'll step back here so you guys can see me even better. So feet, and legs and knees are gonna be all together. That's the first thing. Now, we call it soft, but being soft means I'm just gonna slightly flex my knees. I am going to push my hips forward towards you. I'm going to squeeze my glutes, those are my butt muscles, so I'm gonna squeeze my buttocks together. I'm gonna roll back my shoulders, and I'm going to either draw in my navel or brace the core. What do I mean by drawing in the navel? Well, here's my analogy. I always do this analogy. I always come back to this one analogy. But let's say, we're at the beach and we eat a really big meal, but we want to look very svelte. What do? We draw our navel in, we create that vacuum effect, right? We suck it in. So suck it in. That particular movement is called the vacuum, and it really engages the transverse abdominis. That particular muscle, believe it or not, is the only core muscle you have that connects from the anterior to the posterior. So the transverse abdominis, again, there's going to be a quiz, trying to help everybody here, but that's a very, in all seriousness, important core muscle, okay? So back to our upright planks. Again, my knees are soft. I'm engaging my heels. My pelvis is forward. I'm squeezing my buttocks together. I'm going to roll my shoulders back. I'm going to squeeze my scapula, and I'm again drawing in, and I'm holding this position. So let me show you from the side, and this should feel like work. It's definitely not easy, and please feel free to do it at home. But again, knees are soft. I'm engaging my heels. Pelvis is forward. I'm rolling back my shoulders. I'm drawing in that navel like we talked about, and squeezing my scapula. And for the neck, you can either just look forward, or you can look a little bit relaxed by looking down. The goal would be, again, if you're a beginner, you want to try to hold it for 2 to 3 sets, let's say of 30 to 60 seconds. But be surprised. I mean, again, it's not easy. It is not easy. And you'll know it'll feel like work because you may shake a little bit. And if you shake, that's the nervous system. And I always tell everybody, if you're shaking, that means the nervous system and the muscular system are working so well together. And when they work so well together, by the way, it happens for 2 reasons. Number one, you haven't done this movement before, or maybe you're shaking because you have done this movement, it's just been a while. But the shaking is good. That's validation that you're on the correct muscle groups. Now, the next one is the sitting marching. So I'm going to show you sitting, and then I'm going to show you lying down. The sitting marching is a lovely opportunity to work and work out at your desk. So let's say you're somebody and you're fully remote or hybrid situation, and you don't have a lot of time. That we call this workout snacks, right? Where you have a few moments, right? A few moments. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sit on the edge of the chair, and all you're going to do is I'm going to show you in slow motion first. You're going to raise your right knee up towards hip level, and then right back down. Right? I'll move back here so you can see me better. But you're going to move your left knee as well, hip level, right back down. Can you have your hands on the rectus femoris? Those are your big quads muscles. You certainly can. So again, feel free to have your hands on the rectus femoris on both sides. Here I am. I'm going to bring one leg up towards hip level and then down. This is marching. If we feel comfortable, we can pick up the pace. It's gentle. It's great. You're working your core. You're working your lumbar. Again, the lumbar is really important because that particular part of your spine helps with stability. The lumbar is the lower part of your back, but this becomes almost a total body movement. I'm still engaging my chest. I'm engaging my back. So again, I encourage everybody to do this one. Feel free to do it at home as well right now, but we're talking about 2 sets. And if you feel really adventurous, you can always add an extra set. And sometimes I'll put a timer up, or sometimes I'll just say, you know what, make it 30 repetitions, make it a minute. But again, if you're a beginner, we just want to try to create motion. That would be the goal, okay? All right, I'm going to reshare my screen with you guys so you can see the next set of exercises, right? And this is exciting because we're gonna, think about other ways that we can progress, right? So we have a box squat, and we have a bridge, we have a wall push-up and a shoulder plank. We have walking in place and marching in place, and we have balance. So let's talk about the box squat and the bridge, okay? So for the box squat, I'm going to use my chair and I'm going to bring it back here. A box squat is usually done PT work, but it can also be part of the strength training routine as well. And it's a kind way to do it. And why is a box squat so kind? Because we have a chair, right? We have a chair that really helps us know where we are for depth perception, right? One question I get a lot from my clients, or when I do these seminars or demonstrations, people ask me, how low should I squat, right? And, it becomes a bit controversial because depending on the source, they're going to give you different information, but I like to follow the science. And so for me, I always encourage clients to at least go to 90 degrees. 90 degrees to maintain muscle, but also to treat the joints in a healthy manner, but also to regain muscle, or to also create bone density. And that's one of the other benefits of strength training. It's been shown, and I've been seeing with my clients as well, who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, where it's pretty miraculous, where again, we can rebuild the bones before they become more dense. In fact, you have 206 bones in the body, you have 650 muscles in the body, so it's really important to have those bones dense and to build them back up if, again, we are teetering on, let's say, some bone density issues. All right, so let's go over the box squat. I personally like a very, very wide stance because, again, if you have tight hip flexors, this would work for you. I like a wide stance because it's also a very nice combination between the anterior and the posterior. Could you bring your legs in? You could. If you do this, again, it's very quad, thigh, rectus femoris dominant. Okay, so if your goal is, let's say, well, I really want to work my quads aesthetically, or I don't have a lot of strength in my quads, could you do the box squat in this stance? You certainly could. But I like the idea of, again, creating a wide stance, okay? I am not a big believer in external rotation. I think a little bit could be fine depending on some tightness in the calves or the hamstrings or the hips, but I like to have my feet forward, okay? I'm gonna show you guys in slow motion, then I'll pick up the pace a little bit. For balance purposes, if you have something at home where this feels maybe a bit daunting, you could hold on to a loved one. You could have any apparatus around you where it could hold your weight. So it could be another chair, for instance. That would totally be fine as well. Okay, I just want to bring that to your attention. All right, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're looking down. Are our feet forward? Yeah, pretty forward. I want to think about engaging my heels to help me up and not necessarily my hips, okay? I'm going to have my arms out in front of me for balance purposes, which I encourage all beginners to do. And then I'm going to come forward. When I come forward, I'm going to draw the navel in, creating that vacuum effect like we talked about with the standing plank. And I'm also going to squeeze my buttocks together. When I come down, I want to make sure that I'm controlled. And this is the great thing about a box squat. You can change the tempo and you can certainly get creative. But on the eccentric, that means when we lower down, we want to make sure that we are controlled. The joints love it. They love it, meaning that it doesn't tax them as much. All right. So you're going to come down for 1, 2, 3. My butt's on my chair. I feel secure. I'm coming up for 1. Why 1 second? Because the joints during the concentric phase is when we come up, they don't want to be taxed that way. That's actually work for them. And it can be also harmful work for them. So to treat the joints correctly and to also make it very, friendly as well for the muscular system, we want to come down again for a count of 1, 2, 3. I'm sitting down. I'm really driving with my heels. And then again, I'm up for 1. Okay. So that is the box squat. Could we do the marching lying down like we talked about on the screen? Yes. So let me take that again to your attention and show you that yes, you can do it lying down. Is lying down harder? Well, it can be, but I think for a lot of us, if we're beginning a workout routine and we're new to exercise, it can be kind of nice. One of the things I'll say to my clients, especially if I give them homework to do, is when you wake up in the morning, certainly, room temperature water with lemon, and a lot of people like to work out in the morning, which I certainly respect. So it's also a good idea to think about, hey, you can work out on your bed. I mean, if your bed is somewhat firm, sure, you can do a lying march, which we're going to do now, on your bed. That would be perfectly acceptable. So I'm going to show you guys a profile shot here, okay? And I'm going to come down. And when I come down here on the floor, the first thing we're going to think about here is, I want to be comfortable, right? So again, if the bed is not comfortable and you're working out, that is totally fine. You can certainly do it on yoga mat like I'm doing it. Now I'm gonna have my arms up so you guys can see me, but they can certainly be down here. If your arms are down here, can you use your fingertips and your palms for stability? You absolutely can, okay? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make something called the tabletop position, which is like so. And then very gently, I'm going to bring my right heel down. It touches the floor, and now I'm gonna do my left. Does this work the core? You bet. If we want to make it a bit harder or more of a challenge, then I will have my legs further away from my torso, right? So my hands can be here if I need it. If I want to make it a bit more advanced, I can have my hands up here. I would have my feet further away from my torso. Again, my right heel touches the floor, it's back to center, and now my left, it's back to center. I do not want to have my right knee come over my hip, and I want to be very careful that my knees don't rotate in either. So I'll show you guys one more time. I'm coming down for 1, 2, I'm back to center, 1, 2, and I'm back to center, okay? So that is the lying march. All right, let's go back to the screen. Everyone's doing such a great job. And I want to go over, again, some wall push-ups and shoulder planks. We have the walking in place and marching in place. And then again, we have some balance, okay? Okay, so let's go over the wall push-ups. And I want to revisit the bridge as well. Now, for wall push-ups, we would use a wall, of course, and we would make sure that the wall is stable, all right? If you guys can picture it for a moment, and part of the very sort of, crude analogy here, but let's just make sure that I have the wall here. I want to go up high on the balls of my feet. I'm going to make sure that my hands are absolutely centered, where they're either at chest level. I like doing something called the mitten hands. That's really a coined term where we're having our fingers and our thumbs fully extended. So my fingers and my thumbs are fully extended. I'm placing my elbows at 45 degrees. This is the best way to show you guys here because sometimes I'll see this. This is called the T position during a push-up, or it could be a plank. That's something we never want to do. It is very unkind for the rotator cuff and also the anterior deltoid and the medial deltoid in your shoulders. So we never want to be here at 90. We want to bring the elbows in. When we bring the elbows in, it's easier to engage the scapula, okay? So I would go up high on the balls of the feet. I would place again my hands at chest level. I would tuck my tailbone to engage my glutes, and then I would go down into the wall. If we're going to do a wall push-up, the goal would be, all right, well, Can I do a couple sets? Can I create some time under tension? I think when you're a beginner, I encourage people to stay in motion rather than actually making it like a true set count where it has to be 10 reps or it has to be 12 reps. I think usually for lactic acid to kick in and for it to be, again, somewhat hypertrophy based, which is muscle building based with some cardio, a good rule of thumb would be, can we be in motion around 40 seconds? Can we be in motion, let's say, for 45 seconds, right? That would be terrific, okay? So that's the wall push-up. I'm gonna go back to the bridge in a moment, but I wanna go over again, just like walking in place and then balance work before I do the bridge. So for walking in place, if we're somebody who's just beginning and maybe we're having trouble walking, we can certainly hold on to a chair for stability like so. The walking in place is a lot like, let's say, the marching, except it's a bit kinder, believe it or not. Walking, orthopedically speaking, is the safest form of movement you can do. Why? Well, we have a history of walking, right? So whether you're somebody on the call who is a senior or you're somebody who's maybe in your 20s, let's say, you know, walking is something that we all do at times, right? So again, we have that proprioception. Proprioception means mind-body awareness, right? That's an important term because proprioception really means that you are aware of your body at all times, right? And the environment around you. So for walking, if we're a beginner and if we have trouble walking right now, of course, you have my full empathy. We can hold on to a chair and we're only, again, trying to bring our knees up a few inches above the floor. And I stand by what I said earlier, where we want to make sure we're really engaging the heels, right? So this would be, again, walking in place, okay? Very, very important. If it's easy to do, and you're like, I don't need a chair, I'm fine. But again, it's, you know, maybe it's cold out. Obviously in Evanston, you guys have brutal winters, but we still want to work out inside. Can't we just walk in place or around our houses or our apartments or our condos, wherever we live? Sure. And so you can just walk in place like so. And if you feel creative and that feels good, you can certainly walk around, let's say, the chair. In fact, and I don't mean to get too technical here, but if I come towards you guys and I walk, that is the sagittal plane. The reason why I'm talking about this is because when we're in the transverse plane, or some people call it the horizontal plane, you literally have to work and fire different muscle groups. And so if it feels safe to do, and you're encouraged to do so, you can walk around your chair, right? Or you can walk around the coffee table. But the idea here is it's not a march like we went over earlier. You're just bringing your legs up a few inches above the floor. That's it. And then the other piece would be the arm pumping, right? So it's like almost like power walking back in the 80s, right? Well, I love a power walk. And the reason why I like a power walk is because the mind and the body have to work again together. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the balance, right? The balance. So, you know, for runners that I'm training, if they're doing a half marathon, let's say, right? I'll say to them, hey, can you run with your hands in your pockets? Right? If I do this, oh my God, it's so awkward and weird. Like, who would ever do that, right? That's my analogy to say that the upper body also needs to move with speed. And 9 times out of 10, the lower body can move faster than the upper body. But that's, again, not going to be helpful when it comes to balance. So that brings me back to power walk, right? So let's say we can't get outside, it's very cold, and you know, again, it's a brutal day. We can again power walk around the house. Okay? And you can also do it standing in place. If we're going to do it standing in place, I really encourage it for a minute, right? So usually cardiovascular work is 15 seconds in, 15 seconds feels like, again, enough, and that is absolutely enough. If we can push to 30 seconds and that feels great, that's wonderful. If you can get to the minute, even better. But also really listen to yourself to give yourself proper rest, because the rest is going to be absolutely very encouraging. Right? I always say to clients, whether I've been with them for years or if I'm just starting out, the recovery really matters, right? The recovery absolutely matters. And so you know your body better than anybody. I'm a big fan of heart rate monitors, especially the strap. But if there's no strap, what's the rule of thumb to know if, let's say, cardiovascular work is too much? Can you hold a conversation, right? Can you hold a conversation? So if you're walking with a friend or you're walking, let's say, you know, again, around your house alone, and it gets to be, let's say, it feels very vigorous, you're going to ask yourself, can I still hold a conversation? Okay. All right. Before we move on to the next screen, I do want to go over the bridge. And the bridge is, I think, a very good exercise in the sense of it's a really great opportunity to engage your glutes. Now, the glutes are so important for us because the glutes have many functions in the body. They have many, many jobs in the body. But one of the things that glutes do really well is they create hip extension. And why do we care about hip extension? Because we want to be able-bodied. We want to be able to, again, walk. And Having strong glutes just makes everything easier. It really prevents sciatica. It really prevents piriformis issues. You have these, again, these muscles, I like to call them like coffee drinks at Starbucks, but you have the TFL, the tensor fasciae lata, the tibial band, which is your IT band, and those muscles can get very tight. But all these muscles in your lower half are all fighting for the same job, which is hip extension, okay? So I'm gonna come down, I'm gonna show you guys the bridge, and you can get very creative with the bridge, but just for sake of time, I'll show you guys just one way. So the first thing we're gonna do is, because I'm a big believer in strengthening the glutes, and the hamstrings also have their place to get strengthened as well. But I don't like the hamstrings taking over for a bridge, so I'm gonna keep my heels very close to my buttocks. Now, if that is hard for you, you can always go wider, right? But if you have your feet, let's say, further away from your torso, this is going to be a big challenge, right, for the hamstrings. And if they're already tight, it's not a great look. So I like, again, keeping the feet as close as possible. Feet are forward, heels are engaged. I'm going to have my arms up again so you can really see me. When I come up into the bridge, I am really driving with my heels, and I'm really going to engage my glutes. I can push my knees out slightly, and I'm also going to make sure I really engage the core as well. And then I'm down for 1, 2, 3. Remember, the joints don't like to come up with lots of time and attention during that concentric phase. So again, the concentric phase is, again, when we come up. So I'm coming up just, for 1, but on the eccentric phase, that's when we're coming down. Let's take our time. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'll show you guys one more time. I'm up again for 1, pushing down on my heels. Friendly reminder about the heels always. And then I'm down for 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that is the bridge. All right, you guys are doing so great. We have one more thing to go over, and that is balance work. Now, balance work is truly everything, because we don't really think about balance maybe in a strength training routine, but balance work really lets us know what muscles are overactive, what muscles are underactive, and what the weak joint is. So I'm a left dominant person, right? If I stand on my left leg and I bring my right leg up and I have trouble balancing, let's say my right knee comes in, my right hip hikes up, my arms get really wobbly, I'm able to say to myself, and you should be able to say to yourself at home, oh, okay, I had trouble because maybe my knee was coming in. Well, if I'm having trouble with my knee coming in, then it's the knee joint, right? Or let's say I was creating a rounded back, then we know it's the shoulder joint. So in other words, when we do balance work, it is incredibly humbling. I don't care if you're a beginner or you're somebody who's been working out as long as I have, it is still very challenging, all right? When we approach balance work, which is so important for all of us, because I feel like a big fear sometimes that when it comes to, again, I don't mean to, when I say this, I want to be very cautious how I say this to everybody listening today and tuning in. But the seniors that I have worked with and the seniors that I'm working with right now, when they first approach working with me, they have a fear of falling. But they also have a fear of strength training because they don't want to get hurt, right? So which fear is going to win out, right? So again, if it were me, I'd say, of course, let's get rid of that fear of strength training. So that's why balance work is very vital. So I'm going to bring in my chair again for support. If we are someone who's just starting out with balance work, we want to make sure that we feel secure. I encourage everybody to hold on to something. It doesn't have to be for dear life, like we're trying to squeeze the sawdust off something, but it could be a finger or two. But we just want to make sure that we're holding on to something and not elevating our shoulders, keeping our shoulders down. I'm going to start with my left down, because again, I'm a lefty, and then I'm going to have my right up. Okay, so my left is down and my right is up. Now, with my left down and my right up, I'm going to make sure that again, that I'm really keeping again my knee soft. So my knee is soft, I'm engaging my heel, and I'm making sure again that this particular knee does not rotate in. It does not rotate in. You want to make sure again that the kinetic alignment is absolutely present. So my left foot is forward, I'm soft on my left knee, I'm trying to bring my right leg up to hip level. If that is too difficult, then this is fine. This is absolutely fine. What do we do with, let's say, the hand that's not holding on to something? We can put it out to the side, we can put it out in front of us. The goal would be 10 seconds. If we can do this for 10 seconds, then we would approach 20 seconds and eventually 30 seconds, and then we would go back to bring again the leg upward. Now, there are more variations than that, and we can certainly make it more challenging, but that's how I would encourage everybody to start, okay? I'm going to reshare my screen with you guys so we can move on here. I'll grab a sip of water as well. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next slide. And these are the physical exercises that are present in emotional fitness in the actual book that I have written. Now, and this is where I'm going to put all the emotional stuff that we went over earlier with the master mantras and the emotional guidance techniques. Okay, so for the physical exercises, right, we have the advanced stabilization exercises, which are forearm planks. We have high planks, which is a push-up position. We have our squats, isometric squats, and we have our isometric split lunges again. These stabilization exercises I mentioned, they absolutely can help lower blood pressure, but they are the building blocks when it comes to strength. All right. Then we have advanced strength exercises like push-ups, squats, split lunges. And then if we feel comfortable, we can add equipment. As I said earlier in this presentation, I am a big believer in just using your body weight first. But if that becomes maybe easy or a bit trite and we feel comfortable adding in dumbbells or bands, kettlebells, we certainly can. Okay. So I want to pick, again, I know time's a factor here because I want to get to everyone's questions as well. But I'm going to run through all of these, and then I'm going to pick one exercise and perform emotional fitness on myself for you guys to see. Okay. So I'm going to reshare my screen with you guys, and then I'm going to make myself bigger here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over the forearm plank. I'm going to show you this direction before I start because I think it'll be easier for the view. We want to make sure, this is one of my pet peeves personally, but we want to make sure that we don't make a fist when we plank. We also want to make sure we really break up our shoulders from each other and we really engage the forearms. Believe it or not, your forearms are very strong. Your ulna, your radius, your pronator tensors, they can absolutely handle a lot of weight. Also, then you really encourage your body to work unilaterally, meaning your left side can work independently from your right, okay? So we're going to go through the plank, we're going to go through the push-up, and we'll go through a lunge and a squat. And then I'm super excited to do emotional fitness with you guys and put everything together and then answer everyone's questions. So I appreciate everyone hanging with me. All right, the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to do the forearm plank. So I'm going to start with my forearms on the mat and making sure that they are broken up. Feet, knees, and legs are getting together to really work those core stabilization muscles. I'm going to tuck my tailbone to really engage my pelvis. I'm drawing my navel in, I'm squeezing my glutes, and I'm really pushing down on my forearms. The goal would be to hold this position if we can for 20, maybe even up to 60 seconds if it's possible. If it feels like that's too much, that is certainly acceptable. You can always stop at 20, you can always stop at 10. But the goal is, again, to create that isometric movement and to be in it, okay? Since we're down here, let's have some fun. Let's do the push-up. This might be, I think, my favorite exercise all the time. And it's a great exercise for another particular reason. And it really does come down to posture, right? I mean, posture is the first building block that we went over in this particular seminar, in this presentation. A push-up is really a movable plank, okay? So let me show you the top part, right? Again, I'm going to create the mitten hands. I'm going to place my thumbs on the mat with my fingertips off. I want to have the feet, knees, and legs together again for core stabilization muscles. I'm going to tuck my tailbone. This here is the top of the plank. This would be the top of the plank. I would try to hold this for 10, 20, 30 seconds, or maybe a minute. And then I'm going to come down into the push-up with my knees gently touching the mat. And then I'm right back up. Remember, we're coming down slowly for 3, and then I'm coming up for 1. On the way up, I do not want to take a lot of energy. If I come up and it feels like, oh, it feels hard, then we can always break to our knees. I don't teach push-ups on the knees for a particular reason, and it really does cheat the core. As I said earlier, we have 50 core muscles. Only one of those muscles connects from the anterior to the posterior, and we really want to make sure that we don't cheat ourselves by engaging that transverse abdominis. If I go to my knees, I'm not going to work that particular muscle. And some of those pelvic muscles in the lower back may get really tight. They may not really enjoy it, right? They may be uncomfortable, in other words, right? So even though push-ups on your knees, it's certainly easier, I prefer to do them in a plank position, okay? So we have the push-up, we have the plank, we have those forearm planks. The next thing to do here would be a squat. Now, we did go over the box squat earlier, which is fantastic. But here, I'm going to show you guys where I'm not going to use a chair or any apparatus, right? Arms can be out in front of me. I can give myself a hug. Why not, right? Talked about unconditional love. Why not give myself a hug? Okay, but in all seriousness, we're going down again for a count of 2 or 3. Could even be 1, but we're going to make sure we come up for 1. For also synovial fluid. Synovial fluid is found in your joints. And as we all age, we run out of that fluid. But the good news is movement can help produce more of that fluid, which makes us feel more lubricated, which then translates into movement feeling even easier. Feel good. It's a feel good feeling. And of course, when you're moving, it just feels even easier. We don't feel as stuck, let's say, right? So I'm going to lower down here to 90 degrees because for me, 90 degrees feels great. I'm making sure I'm sitting back on my heels. I'm giving myself that hug. I'm coming up. I'm pushing my pelvis forward towards you guys, and I'm engaging my heels. Let me show you from the side. Okay, so I'm giving myself a hug. My feet are forward, sitting back on my heels and going down again towards 90 degrees. When I come up, I'm really engaging my heels and I'm pushing my pelvis forward. Okay, again, on the way up, we don't want to take a lot of time. I want to make sure I'm coming up with, again, some speed. Other exercise to share is the lunge. Push-ups are maybe my favorite exercise for the upper body. A lunge is my favorite for the lower body. Because a lunge, it doesn't get the same, let's say, praise as a squat or a deadlift, but a lunge is fantastic because it is a single leg squat if you think about it, but it also really stretches the hip flexor and the psoas and all those pelvic muscles that get really tight. We just want to make sure that we're doing it correctly, all right? So I'm going to show you guys an isometric way, and then I'll certainly show you what it means to be in motion, all right? So the first thing I'm going to do here is I personally like taking a stance where my feet are 2.5 feet to 3 feet apart from each other. You can give me a closer stance to 2 feet. If we do that, it becomes, again, very quad dominant, right? Very rectus femoris dominant, which is fine if that's your goal. But I like to, again, when I'm strength training and I'm with my clients, I like a lot of bang for your buck, in other words. I like to work the interior chain and then the posterior chain behind us, right? So I'm going to get into a lunge position. I'm going to make sure about 3 feet. This looks about right, maybe about 3.5 feet. I'm going to drop my right hip down slightly because I want to make sure, again, we talked about earlier, my hips are aligned. I'm sitting back on my heel. My knee's not coming forward. If I come forward with my knee, it just really hurts the patella. It murders it, in fact. So you want to make sure that, again, when you're in this position, you're sitting back on your heel, right? And again, if somebody were to push you, you wouldn't fall because your heel, again, we talk about having so much energy, it's there to support you, right? I'm going to give myself a hug. My arms could be out in front of us for balance. I'm lowering down towards 90 degrees. When I drive up, I'm coming up quickly. I'm engaging my right glute, and I'm making sure I'm really pushing on my left heel. Let me show you guys again. I'm down for 1, 2, 3, and then I'm up for 1. If I were to stay here in isometric, let's say component, I would literally just stay here at 90 degrees. Okay? If lunging is too difficult, can you use a chair for help? Absolutely. You can absolutely use a chair for help. Okay, now this was a lot. You guys are doing such a fabulous job. I want to make sure I have time to go over all the questions. So I'm not going to share my screen right now. And let me go over these questions here. Okay. So the first question is, I'm going to keep all the names anonymous, of course. So the first question is, how do you measure success for emotional stress? That is a fantastic question. First of all these questions that you guys sent were amazing. It's very impressed collectively. Okay, how do you measure success for emotional stress? For me, it's an easy one to say, is it affecting your personal life in a negative way? Is, let's say, the stress of, your life, being compromised by, I don't want to see my friend tonight, or I'm not talking to my spouse. That would be a very negative thing, right? Or you're sort of avoiding the world, right? You're sort of avoiding the world. The good news is that I think when it comes to emotional stress, we all have the ability to say, is it affecting my life in a negative way? If it is, then of course, we want to make sure that we're making particular changes, right? So if stress is it can be a killer, of course. I think a lot of us are really prone to worrying, and worrying in that moment, we feel like maybe really helps us. But the truth is that all worrying is really doing is robbing you from your present, right? That's all really worrying is doing. So if we could think about other strategies besides worrying, of course, that will take us, back to the present. That would be very helpful. But if you have stress in your life and it's not affecting how you're treating your spouse or your kids or your job, you're doing a great job. Okay. Next question is how to get started. So how to get started? Yeah, it's a great question. I think exercise can be very overwhelming. And I get this question a lot, by the way, from clients I first start working with. For me, it's what we went over today, which again, I want to go, before we wrap up in this call, I'm going to go back and put everything together with the emotional and physical. But starting off, let's say in a squat position, doing a box squat, doing a lying march, standing in place. Just again, engaging your body weight would be very important. Okay. This was a very interesting question. What is the difference between Tai Chi and Qigong? And I will be very transparent as always with everybody constantly, off and on the record. I'm not an expert when it comes to these two forms of exercise, but to my knowledge, and I used to see this one gentleman when I lived in Brooklyn doing Tai Chi every morning, which was super cool, by the way. And eventually we became good acquaintances and he told me he was 84. And he said he was doing it for self-defense, believe it or not. But Tai Chi is really done with slow movements, and there is a balance component to it all. And Qigong is more about kind of the emotional fitness stuff that we talked about earlier, where we're creating movements where we're lying down, we're creating movements where, again, maybe we're standing, but it's energy circulating in the body and really embracing that energy, okay? Next question is, how can you lose weight around the waist? So a very common question, excellent question. And the true answer to this is being in a calorie deficit. So it's all a math game, right? Unfortunately, for those maybe who are not great at math. But it's 1 pound is 3,500 calories. And I know that might seem like, well, what does that even mean, Shaun? Well, you want to sort of think about, what is your day-to-day activity? Are you somebody who is still working? Is there a lot of rigorous activity in your day? If there is, then you may need more carbohydrates. You may need more macros. Macros are carbohydrates, fat, and protein. So you may need to, create more fuel to move more, right? Let's say if you have a very rigorous lifestyle. If you don't, if you sort of have like, let's say a sedentary lifestyle and you don't move a lot, but you want to lose weight, then I encourage you to be in that calorie deficit to say, okay, do I really need, X amount of food today? And you might, and I don't want to say that you don't, but if you don't, if we're just maybe eating out of emotion or boredom, we want to kind of come up with the right, and it's a complex question, but you want to come up with, again, the right calorie, let's say, math for yourself. So if somebody's trying to lose weight, and just some crude math would be if the government says, okay, 2,000 calories is what someone should have daily, but if you're trying to lose weight and you're not very active, then maybe you want to think about 1,700 calories or something like that, because it doesn't have to be anything so extreme. And when it comes to calorie math, which I'll say to clients is, look, I don't expect people to count their calories, but you can eyeball things, right? You can say, okay, if I'm having meat, right, I take my palm, that should be your meat serving of, let's say, 4 to 6 ounces, right? And if I'm using my fingertips, this should be the starch on my plate, right? And if I'm making a fist, this should be the vegetables and the fruit, okay? All right. How can emotional fitness treat IBS and trauma? Oh, what a great question. I love this question. So your gut microbiome, right, in your stomach, you are what you eat, and you're also your emotions. And so if we're somebody who is chronically stressed and we're having a hard time, let's say, breaking down fiber, our gut microbiome will suffer. Your gut microbiome becomes like your third eye, as they say. Can you hold anxiety and depression and stress and trauma in your stomach? Absolutely. You can hold it all over your body. I mean, this stuff is very cellular, as I said. So it's really important, again, to think about ways to give yourself relief. I mentioned earlier the journaling. I mentioned working out. We can talk about breathing. We can talk about even just deep meditation, just being in the pause, being in the still, right? All those could be very helpful tools. Okay. Next question is, how can I stay on track when I am good at the beginning, but not staying with the program? So how do we create consistency? Great question, right? We all, I think, are our best selves on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then maybe Thursday comes around or Friday comes around, or, we have all very good intentions, let's say, to create New Year's resolutions in January, and then here we are, top of March, and maybe some of those resolutions have gone by the wayside. So what I would say to you is, it's not how you start. Right? This is not about the start. This is always about, again, the journey. And so I would encourage you to say, okay, so I'm really mad at myself because, I went out, Shaun, and I had pizza and I drank wine and, I didn't eat a single green, right? So it's hard for me to, find the inspiration to work out. I would challenge that person to say, 1 or 2 bad or 1 or 2, let's say, unhealthy meals, let's say, aren't going to sink your ship, just like 1 or 2 healthy meals are not going to make you healthy, right? Like, in other words, like eating McDonald's once a week is not going to make you unhealthy, and having a salad once a week is not going to make you healthy either, right? So I encourage that person, again, who may be struggling with getting back, to remember again why you started, right? Remember again why you started. Go back to the mantras of loving yourself unconditionally, being your biggest fan. And remember that take it day by day. Don't think about the larger outcome. Oh, I didn't lose the 20 pounds yet. That's okay. Take it day by day. All right. Okay, next question is, what is the best breathing technique and how important is it for emotional and physical health? It is very important when you breathe. It's truly, again, your power. For a lot of times, I think, when I start with a new client, they actually hold their breath. I know when I first started strength training, I was guilty of that, honestly, too. I didn't have the proper breathing down, but it's very important to breathe again with your diaphragm. And your diaphragm, by the way, for most of us is our strongest core muscle. But I like I like all forms of breathing, to be honest. But one of my favorite forms of breathing is box breath. What box breathing is that you're taking in air for a count of 4. And then I'm going to exhale for 4. You want to fill your lungs and fill your diaphragm for 4, and then exhale for 4. There are many different techniques, but I would encourage you, whether it's breathing out your mouth or your nose, to not hold your breath, okay? Will you talk about how to fall if you lose your balance? Yes. So let me take a step back here. So I have tripped in my life when I lived in the city, and that is a very scary thing. When you fall, some of us say, oh my God, it's kind of like slow motion, like I'm in a movie. And then for some of us, it just happens so abruptly, right? And the number one thing I would say to anybody if they're going to fall is to use your form or use your hand. You do not want to fall on your face. If you fall on your face, you could certainly break your nose, but worse, you could concuss, right? So if you feel like you're falling, let's just say I trip for a second. I'm a left dominant person. If you're a right dominant person, you would, again, try to brace yourself with the right. But for this example, I'm a lefty. So if I'm walking down the street, and I trip and I fall somehow, right? Or if I fall even in my house, if I'm going down, I am going down with my palm and my forearm. I encourage you, when you go down, though, if you can, land on your forearm. If you were to break your forearm, of course, I have all the empathy and sympathy in the world for you. That's probably 6 to 8 weeks of healing versus being concussed, or versus, some brain trauma or head trauma, right? It's depending on how fast it was or how abrasive that fall was. So again, you're walking down the street, you're in your home, you fall, try to land on your dominant side and try to fall on your forearm. If you can't, and it happens so quickly, then brace yourself again with your palm and your thumb. But you do not want to land on your face under any circumstance, if possible. Okay, it's a great question. Okay, we have 3 more questions, and then we're going to wrap up soon. What would be the most immediate benefit to do when you're feeling emotionally stressed? So for me, it's personally journaling. If I'm feeling emotionally stressed, I get out my MacBook, or it could be a pen and paper, and I let that stream of subconscious flow, right? I let it flow. And 9 times out of 10, you guys, which I find so fascinating, if you're stressed about X, like you're stressed about your job, and you start journaling, you won't even be journaling about your job. It's almost like a outer body experience where you think you're upset about something, and then something else actually is really the true root of it. So for me, I personally love, love, love journaling, but it could be exercise, it could be meditation, it could be breathing, it could be the box breath. I do think it's important to create some sort of self-care. If you're someone that loves a bath, draw yourself a bath. If it's somebody that loves listening to music, it's your favorite song, you listen to your favorite song. If it's somebody who loves to draw, then draw or color. For a while there, I remember coloring books were all the rage. But I think art therapy, music therapy, all that certainly has its place. And again, we just want to do something physical. As I mentioned earlier in this presentation, anxiety gets destroyed by movement. So create some sort of movement, and even being still and breathing is movement. Okay. All right, a couple more questions. How can movement help release anger, sadness, and grief? So these things are cellular. And, with some of my unresolved trauma, when I first started working out, I could literally feel it in the body. How can we feel stress and trauma and anger in the body? Because those are the emotions that you felt, let's say in a previous age, and they never got released. They never got released. So one of the things that I like to do here at home, or when I was, at a local gym working out, I pick a mantra, right? So let's say it's accepting your path, and I would create movement while thinking about something that I was really having a hard time accepting. Did that release anger? Absolutely. Did that release, let's say, stress? Absolutely. Grief is a really tough one. You know, I've experienced grief in my life, whether it's my aunt or grandparents, a good friend of mine named Brad. I mean, grief is a real tragedy, and it's so important to also release grief and try to replace it with love. It's one thing to say to somebody, don't do X, or if I'm disciplining my children, I say, don't do X, right? But the truth is, we want to give somebody the opportunity to create a blueprint of how to heal, right? So if you're somebody who's struggling with grief, my strong suggestion would be thinking about your memories with that loved one, or it could be grieving something that maybe it was a job that you lost or whatever it is, but trying to think about the positive times and the enjoyment that you had and what it can bring you now. What can you learn from it now? How can grief be a teacher to you presently? The next question, the last question, then we're going to wrap it up with the emotional and physical, which I'm so excited about, is what are techniques that I can use to cope with all the negative news in our country and the world? So that is a very good question. And I have lots of people in my network who would love to hear that answer too. So the first thing I would say is if you're somebody who, reads, the newspaper, whether it's online or it's a hard copy, if you're somebody who watches the news, give yourself just an hour, please. Do not get immersed. Try your very best. Say, I'm just going to allow myself to watch or read for an hour. Or you could even say, I'm going to take all the updates off my phone. I'm going to take those off my phone. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that if I do have conversations with certain family members or friends, I'm not going to get emotionally attached, right? I think it's very important to limit the hour. I think it's very important to detach, especially if you're working with, you're talking with people you love and they may not see eye to eye. What you can do is, though, we talked about journaling and things that you can do for self-care, but what you can do is I really believe it starts in your community, right? It starts locally. What can you do, let's say in Evanston? What can you do in Chicago? What can you do in the surrounding areas? How can you create change, right? Is there somebody you could write? Is there a support group that you could talk with? If there's something particular in the news that's really bothering you, where can you, again, create that proper change, right? So that's really, really important, I think, to think about it as, okay, I'm just going to give myself an hour that day. I'm going to not attach to family members emotionally or friends. And I'm also going to make sure that I can maybe feel empowerment, right? That's master mantra number 3, right? Knowing that you are empowered. How can I turn this into empowerment? What can I do? All right. I want to respect everybody's time. I have a couple minutes left, and this is putting it all together, which I'm very excited about. Okay. So I mentioned the story. Remember, vulnerability leads to what? Invincibility, right? So I mentioned the story, it's kickball, right? And I missed the ball, and I fall on my back, and the counselor called me a loser, and all the kids laughed at me, right? All the kids laughed at me. And the counselor was terrible. So here's me putting it all together. So I'm going to choose the master mantra. And for me, it's master mantra number 1, knowing that I am, again, accepting this path, knowing that instead of shying away from fitness and physical activity, no, I'm gravitating towards it. I'm running towards it. I'm befriending, let's say, these demons. I'm not running away from the demons, I'm befriending them. And I encourage you to do the same thing. If there's something that you're struggling with that just feels so painful, do not run away from it, run towards it. Believe me, I'm living proof that you can overcome it. Okay, I'm going to choose the squat just because, again, I'm visually in front of you guys, and it's one of the exercises that, again, I've written in the book that I love. So I am accepting my path, master mantra number 1. The second part is the emotional guidance techniques. Hopefully we'll all remember those. Visualization. So as I lower down into the squat, I'm again thinking about that moment in kickball, but I'm not a victim of it. No, I'm empowered by it. Right? Because I'm accepting that happened to me. And then as I rise up and I push my heels off the floor, I'm visualizing the outcome that I'm in right now with you all presently. Meaning that moment didn't break me. That moment, even though as painful as it was at the time, it really gave birth to who I am now. It gave me the opportunity to teach, to guide, to help, to nourish not only myself, but the people that I'm lucky enough to be in front of. Okay, so when you're in, let's say, a squat or a push-up or any physical activity, I again encourage everybody to think about an emotional guidance technique, a master mantra. You're lowering down into the squat for 1, 2, 3, and then you're coming up and you're thinking about, again, a different outcome. And then at the same time, you feel encouraged and empowered because where your life is right now has brought you to this incredible opportunity. I want to just share my screen one more time for you guys to just thank you so much for your time, to thank you so much for, again, listening to me and being here. I consider you guys all new friends, and I'm wishing everybody their best emotional and physical health. If, again, you like this presentation and you like what I had to say, you can check me out at zetlinfitness.com. Again, I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I just want to thank again the Levy Senior Center Foundation, the City of Evanston. It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Shaun, and thank you all again for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the program. Please consider supporting the Levy Senior Center Foundation with a donation today. Your generous donations help us continue to create opportunities to serve older adults in our community by providing informative and entertaining programmings, as well as making needed improvements to the Levy Center. You can donate online at levyseniorcenterfoundation.org. And thank you again. We hope you all have a wonderful day.